My name is Frank Spreng. I am the professor of economics at McKendree University and am also the director of the M.B.A. program. The topic that I'm going to talk about today deals with the business cycle, and the title is "The Business Cycle is Alive and Well." My understanding of this material can be divided up or explained in four parts representing four periods of my life. The first of those four periods is as a grade school and high school student, when I was taught two things which were not taught to me as a part of understanding business cycles, but a much broader set of principles. The first was that everything that goes up must also come down, and that is reminiscent of the way business cycles work, where you have incomes going up and down in a kind of periodic basis. The other thing that I was taught at the same time was that trees do not grow to the sky. And that has turned out to be a good guide to what we now in modern economics refer to as asset bubbles. And we have just had one of those in the form of rapidly accelerating housing prices. And what we discovered is housing prices cannot continue to go up forever. They are like trees. They do not grow to the sky. They eventually quit growing and indeed decline, or in the case of trees, eventually die. The second period or time when I learned more about business cycles was when I was an undergraduate student and then a graduate student in economics. And there we were taught that business cycles were the recurring growth and decline of gross domestic product, incomes, and employment levels. And what we learned was that while the overall economy may grow more or less continuously, it doesn't grow at an even rate. And in fact, this growth takes place with higher and lower periods of growth, and that is the business cycle. The other thing we were taught at that time was that there were two crucial variables that we always had to take consideration of, and those were the level of inflation, or the relationship between the buying power of money and the value of the goods and services that people wanted to buy. And of course, the other variable, one that everybody thinks about, especially in periods when the economy is not doing so well, is levels of employment, or more pertinently perhaps, levels of unemployment. So that's the second period of my development of understanding business cycles. The third period is during a great deal of my career as a professional economist and as a teacher. And there we were told two times during that time that the business cycle had been defeated. The first time was in the late 1960s, when we thought fiscal policy could be so refined that we no longer had to worry about excessive growth or decline in the level of income. We could manage all that. Well, by the 1970s, we knew that didn't work. The second time is during the 1990s, in the growth of what we now refer to as the new economy, which is really high-tech based. And there were those who thought that the business cycle would never recur. But of course, we now know that that's not true, and the business cycle is still there. The fourth period where I learned something about the business cycle is the current time period. And now we have learned or relearned a number of lessons we either knew or should have known anyway. And the first is that the business cycle is still alive and well. The second is that if you have an asset bubble, like the housing price bubble that we had during the 90s and early 2000s, that will greatly increase the impact of the business cycle, so that in our current downturn in the business cycle, the downturn was much steeper, deeper, and more persistent than we expected. The third thing that we have learned is that the business cycle has a more or less natural life that it has to take, and that there's very little we can do about it. This is partly a matter of we have to sit it out and wait, and we are now in certainly a period where the business cycle is no longer going down, but we're in a period you might think of as the doldrums, and we haven't yet healed the economy sufficiently to begin a new recovery. The final thing that we have relearned is that too much government involvement in the process doesn't really help us and doesn't really make the business cycle go away. So that is my notion of why I believe the business cycle is still alive and well. We are, in recent years, re-experiencing all the phases of the business cycle and repeating all the lessons that we've learned various times in the past. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this has added something to your knowledge of the macroeconomy. Thank you.